Hey everybody, welcome back to Fistful of Cards Doomtown Deck Building Series. I'm your best friend Patrick Fair, and it's been a while. So welcome back us, and today we're going to be talking about Gun Fu out of 108 Drunken Masters. So first and foremost, as always, we need to talk about who is this for and what is our goal. If you're the kind of player who doesn't need real life friends and is more focused on alt arts and playmats, then this deck might be for you. Or if you're the kind of player who just absolutely hates Sloan and are just like, you know what, I need a deck that can just kill every Sloan dude that's played, then this deck might be for you. Because our goal is to kill as many low value starting posse dudes as we can in order to put our opponent into a position where they can no longer recover and we're able to win with as few control points as possible. So let's get it started. As a note, if you are unfamiliar with the Kung Fu rules and you are not sure of yourself when playing the Kung Fu rules, don't play this deck because it is heavily reliant on playing multiple Kung Fu cards in conjunction with each other and using the combo mechanic and using a lot of the other mechanics that involve Kung Fu. And so if you're the kind of person who's like, well, I'm only comfortable with Kung Fu if I run a single copy of Rabbit's Deception in my legendary holster deck, then that's not the same thing as what we're talking about today. So let's get into it. 108 Drunken Masters is a home, and it's a home that gives us 19 wealth and 3 production, and that's why it matters. The other parts of this home are okay. You could swap it out for the other 19 home, Glorious Gifts, which I believe is the name of it. However, I'm running this one just for a little bit of insurance. It does have that 19 wealth, 3 production. Its ability is that passively it turns deeds at the end of each street into saloons, and after you reveal the pull for a technique, reduce the pull by the amount of saloons you control, generally 1 or 2. If you succeed by 5 or more, you may add the pulled card to your hand. So we'll get a little bit of card draw out of this occasionally, but for the most part, we're using this just as a insurance buffer for some of our higher value pulls, and it's a little bit of a backup in case we're forced to use our Kung Fu dudes who are a little bit worse at than our starting posse ones. So what is Gun Fu? Well, Gun Fu is a deck that takes advantage of shotguns combination with cards like Zhu's Ferocity and Raking Dragons. Now, I'm going to talk about this deck in sort of a weird order because it is a combo deck. Not just the combo mechanic, but it is a combo archetype deck. And so I need to kind of talk about things with their pieces, and so I'm going to kind of jump around, and I'm sorry if that's confusing. So to start off with, we're running Shotgun. If you're unfamiliar with this card, what it does is you compare your bullets to your opponent's value. If your bullets are equal to or higher than your opponent's value, you may boot this card, and they die. And that means that if I have 4 bullets and you have 4 values, I boot my shotgun and you're aced. Or 3 value or 2 value or ace. And so we're going to be taking a lot of advantage of this particular card. The other aspect of this is Doomsday Supply. Now, Doomsday Supply sort of allows us to go get shotguns, and since this deck is very, very reliant on shotguns, it's basically 4 more chances to get a shotgun. The other part of this combo is Zhu's Ferocity and Raking Dragons with a little bit of pigging out for assistance. Now, the way these 2 cards work is Zhu's Ferocity increases your bullets and lowers your opponent's bullets. The part that matters is that we're getting our bullets higher. The other part of this is Raking Dragons, which lowers our opponent's value. And pigging out also increases the numerical value of cards that reduce your opponent's stats, and by that I mean it'll make Raking Dragons give your opponent -3 value instead of -2. It will also make your opponent's Zhu's Ferocity will do 2 bullets instead of a single bullet, and so that can be pretty useful. The other part of this is that we have picking out which allows us to start combos or continue combos easier because it allows us to grab cards from our discard pile and put them into our hand, and so we can take some advantage out of that. Now again, if you don't know the combo rules, you need to go read them because I'm not going to really go over too much of those things. That's for a different video. That's more of a tutorial video. This is a deck tech. So if you want to play this deck, I highly encourage you to, but you also need to be, up on the Kung Fu rules. So basically, combo allows us, in a nutshell, allows you to play multiple cards on a single action, provided that you have enough Kung Fu. So we're starting Long Wei Fu. Long Wei Fu is a Kung Fu 4. Now, the way that the Kung Fu rules work is that you're allowed to play a number of cards in a combo equal to your Kung Fu rating, because it's not a skill, +1. So if you have 0 Kung Fu, you can do 1 card in a combo. If you have Kung Fu 4, you can do 5 cards in a combo. And so basically, in the perfect world, our combo looks a little something like this. We have a shotgun on Long Wei Fu. Long Wei Fu now has 2 bullets. We play Zhu's Ferocity, Raking Dragons, Zhu's Ferocity, Raking Dragons, Zhu's Ferocity, etc., etc., right? And so we can end up in a situation where Long Wei Fu has 4 bullets and our opponent's value is reduced by 4, which means we can kill everybody who has an 8 or less, right? And so when you think about starting posse dudes, especially out of most non-Morgan factions, the odds of them having higher than, let's say, Agent Provocateur, which is an 8, and Agent Provocateur isn't really that big of a threat, is very unlikely. If we think about common starting posse dudes, we think about things like Thunderboy 6, Willa May 6, Valeria 4, Black Owl 4, Funtime Freddy 3. Everybody's got like an ace drop, Irving Patterson, Jake Smiley kind of thing. A lot of factions have 2s like Randall or Philip Swinford. You get the idea. A lot of posses run primarily low value dudes because low value dudes tend to be worse stat lines and cheaper than most of the higher value dudes. They tend to be the opposite of kings, essentially. So with that in mind, we're able to take advantage of that by attacking our opponent's starting posse with our shotguns in conjunction with our backup cards that make us able to cover a wider array. And that's the basic function of the deck. We have a couple of backup Kung Fu guys who are worse at the combo portion of this, but they're better at having more bullets, so they technically need to do less. But in addition to that, we've got a couple of extra bonus tricks up our sleeve. We do run a couple of pistol whips, just because it's a good card, and occasionally we'll run into someone with something scary, like, say, like a Phantom Fingers or something along those lines that could turn our shotguns off, and we don't want that, so we can just get rid of them altogether. In addition, technically, we can use this as a pseudo-escape. We're not running like a hit-and-run deck now. That's a pretty popular thing out of Legendary Holster, where you do things like, oh, I get in with Stakes Just Rose, and then I get out with Rabbit's Deception, and I just have one guy kill one guy a turn for 5 turns. That's not what this deck is. This deck is get into a fight with 2 shotguns, kill 2 people, kill the other person with just straight poker, and then win the game. And so it's a lot faster, a lot more dangerous, high risk, high reward kind of deck. In addition, we've got a Beef. Now, We Got a Beef is a criminally underplayed card. This is one of the best cards in the game, and I'm going to tell you why right now. This card is a 4 of clubs. It's an action. It costs 1. Its ability is React. After an unbooted dude accepts a call out, but before posses are formed, swap the location of either the mark or the leader with a dude at an adjacent location controlled by the same player. The chosen dude replaces the original mark or leader in the shootout. Now, that card can be very confusing for people because it's got a lot of text and there's a lot of talk of marks and leaders and players and controlled by and all this kind of stuff that requires a lot of bookkeeping and understanding of some of the game's terminology. Basically, what this means is that the common strategy for dealing with shotgun decks is to only commit dudes that are harder to kill with a shotgun, because that makes sense. If I'm running Law Dogs and my starting posse is Thunderboy, Willa May, Philip Swinford, Jake Smiley, somebody, then if I get into a shootout, then I don't want to put Philip Swinford and Jake Smiley into danger, because they're obviously very easy to shotgun. However, Thunderboy, Willa May, a little bit harder. I have to commit a little bit more. I have to play more cards. And so you can't just sit at home and just be scared the entire game, especially if you're a shootout deck. So you do have to commit somebody, but the goal is to commit higher value dudes. That makes sense, right? Well, We've Got a Beef basically says you may commit Thunderboy, but you are for sure committing Jake Smiley. You are for sure committing Philip Swinford. And basically, they can boot back into the fight, right? They can still say, like, if we're in Town Square and they call you out with Thunderboy, or you call them out with whatever, and you go, okay, this is Thunderboy, he's accepted. Thunderboy switches places with Philip Swinford. He can still boot Thunderboy back into the fight. You'll still have to get into that shootout. However, you basically just said, I choose this person to die, even though you have strategically tried to deny me the right. But I'm going to play We Got a Beef. Philip will join the fight. I will kill Philip, period. And that makes it so that our plan of just killing our opponent's starting posse very, very quickly can be achieved. So this is a fantastic card, very underplayed, especially in shotgun decks, legendary holster decks, any deck that has any sort of acing card. This card is fantastic. So, moving down the list a little bit more, we've got 2 anti-cheating cards. We've got 6 anti-cheating cards, but we got 2 different kinds. We have Inner Struggle and an Accidental Reunion. So I'm going to talk about this one first. An Accidental Reunion is a scare tactic anti-cheating card. It's technically not an anti-cheating card, which is interesting. It's a headline, which means it turns off other headlines. It's also turned off by headlines, so keep that in mind. We do have a lower value deck with a weaker structure. I didn't talk about structure, but I will in a second. Essentially, we are a 16-15 straight flush deck. We do have straight flush out of ace through 6, and we would have a 16-16 deck, but Long Wei Fu is in our starting posse, so we don't actually have a real 16-16 deck. We have a 16-15 straight flush deck. So, going back to what I was talking about, we tend to win low ball. And because we tend to win low ball, we can turn off headlines, and that can be very important when you're playing against someone like a Calling the Cavalry deck or something along those lines, because those decks can be really scary for us because our shootout capabilities are not quite as powerful as some of the other more shootout-focused hand rank manipulation decks. So, continuing on, we could replace this card with I'm Your Huckleberry, and that's fine. The other thing that this card does is it sort of tricks our opponent. It basically says, like, you can see that I will punish you if you cheat. And what that does is it puts, like, a mental cap on our opponent, which can be a useful tool. While it technically, your opponent should be able to analyze the situation and be able to take risks and sort of do what's best in the given state. A lot of times what's best in the given state isn't exactly 100% clear, because Doomtown tends to be flexible in kind of what can happen. And what I mean by all of that is basically you play this card, and unlike a normal cheating resolution where your opponent's like, well, do they have an anti-cheating card or don't they? You're like, here's my anti-cheating card, will you cheat? And that's important because we can make straight flush. And straight flush is the strongest non-legal 5-of-a-kind hand that most decks can make. And most people are looking for, like, legal full houses. And so if you say, if you cheat, I'm going to punish you, then your opponent is like, they played that card, maybe I'll just play a legal full house. Or maybe I won't cheat. And if they do, then it just furthers your strategy of killing people, because then you're like, shotgun, accidental reunion, you owe me 3 bodies. And all of a sudden you're fantastic. The other card we're running is Inner Struggle. Inner Struggle is a bizarre card. Now, the way that this card works is that it's a condition, so it attaches to your opponent's home, and every time they cheat, either in low ball or in a shootout, all of the Inner Struggles boot. And when they boot, your opponent has -1 hand rank for the rest of the turn. Now, this is really powerful for a couple of reasons. One, there is anti-condition cards that can remove this card from your opponent's home. However, nobody runs them because they're super narrow in their application. So this card is very difficult to actually deal with. Number two is if you can get a couple of these on your opponent's hand, it basically means that for the duration of a turn in which they accidentally cheat on lowball, for the duration of that turn, all of their hand ranks are at -2 for the rest of the turn. So no matter how many shootouts, you basically get free anti-cheating, which is very, very powerful. Also, it just happens to be the case that we need a lot of these other values like 4 and stuff, things like Coach Whip. You could run Coach Whip over We Gotta Beef, but I would highly recommend running We Gotta Beef because of how powerful of a play it is. So those are our anti-cheating cards, and you can obviously, as with all of our decks, you can change things as you see fit. We're going to go over our deeds momentarily. I'm running a little bit of a cheeky deed suite, and you can switch these out for more standard, sort of more of low to the ground kind of deeds. We've got Mausoleum and the Cemetery. Now, Mausoleum and the Cemetery both get better the more we kill things. So Mausoleum gets extra control points if we kill things. Cemetery usually will get production, but sometimes will also get control points. And so we can combo those things in conjunction with our shotguns to get very, very powerful continuous plays. Basically, we can do things like with Mausoleum out, if our opponent has a dude and we go, okay, Mausoleum's worth a control point, I kill a dude, I remove one of your influence, and I get an extra control point, which furthers our ability to win by just eliminating a few or all of our opponent's starting posse, which is very important. The most important deed in this entire deck is actually Pearly's Palace. Now, remember how I mentioned earlier that combo cards count as a single action if you play them as part of a combo? Well, that means with Pearly's Palace and our ability to win lowball more consistently than most decks, we can take the first 2 shootout actions. And when your first action is Raking Dragons, Juice Ferocity, Raking Dragons, then your second action can be Shotgun because of the way that combo cards work. And so essentially you can take the first 2 actions of a shootout, and since you have a shotgun, that can be very, very terrifying. Our starting posse is pretty obvious. We rely heavily on Long Wei Fu. We do have some backup dudes with higher bullets, or some very low Kung Fu. And our deck is full of some extra backup Kung Fu dudes. But we are a very Kung Fu reliant deck, and we are a very starting posse reliant deck. We rely heavily on our starting posse to achieve victory, and we achieve victory by destroying our opponent's starting posse. So we are a very high risk, high reward style of play. Now, I said that this deck was particularly good against Sloan. I've been looking at a lot of the tournaments lately as of the making of this video in the early days of December. And there have been a lot of Sloan victories. Sloan tends to sit around those 2, 3, 4, 5 values, and all of a sudden you play a single copy of Raking Dragons and you can shotgun someone, and that can be very detrimental. Acing cards are very powerful against Sloan decks, so even if you don't run Gunfu, I want to see more acing cards in our decks to defeat the wave of red that's coming through. And that's about going to wrap it up for me today. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you hated the video, give it a thumbs down. Either way, we want to see you in the comments section, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.